Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Canadian Football Countdown. I'm Ryan Coop, back with another CFL Fantasy Draft Strategy video, this time talking about the running back position. The CFL season kicks off next week, and CFL Fantasy is officially live. The season-long game, the weekly game, they're all out there. Folks are scheduling their drafts. I just completed my first draft in the new system, one of our Discord leagues. We did a six-person draft, and it was a challenge. I gotta say, I've never done a six-person league before, a six-person draft. It was a challenge, and in particular, the running back position is going to be the most challenging position of your entire draft. So we're going to dive into that today, break that down. If you missed it, go back, check out the quarterback strategy video previously uploaded, and hopefully going to, in the next couple of days, fit in a wide receiver one for you there as well. On top of that, Saturday night, the Canadian Football Countdown Private Draft League with all four hosts, myself, Trey, Adam, and Mike. We'll be recording that one Saturday night, so look forward to that as an example of a draft that might take place. We will be using our own systems, though, not the CFL site, because we are continuing our standard keeper league from the last couple of years that we really ironed out the process for. So without further ado, let's dive in. Let's talk about the running backs here for CFL Fantasy for 2026. And like I said, this position is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be a challenge in a six-team draft in particular. I happen to have, in the draft that I just completed, the first overall pick and naturally selected Nathan Rourke, which was a surprise to nobody, and then found that six running backs went off the board before it ever came back to me at the end of round two. And they were really the only six strong, viable starters that are out there, because there's a lot of question marks at the running back position. You have 9 teams only across the league. Most weeks only 8 play. The first couple weeks of the season, there's only 3 games. So that means there's only 6 starting running backs out there. And there also happen to be 3 teams in Hamilton, Montreal, and Toronto that are big question marks when it comes to who is their starting running back. Are they going to be splitting it, etc.? So we're going to talk through all the options, all the strategies here. But the one overall main strategy, I would say, is to jump on the running back train early. You need to get a good running back in there. Take it from myself. I missed out early on. I kind of faded till late 7th round, grabbed the Montreal running backs, both of them, because I have until their week 5 bye week to go and figure out which one's the starter. And maybe I go and drop the other one along the way and hopefully get some clarity. But running backs are going to go early in drafts, as they should. And let's talk through all the options here. Let's start off with, all of the top 6. And by top 6, I mean James Butler, Dedrick Mills, Justin Rankin, Greg Bell, AJ Ouellette, and Brady Oliveira. A lot of them are interchangeable. To me, they are both, the workhorses for their particular teams. A lot of them get receiving value out of them, which is what I really value from a running back. The point per reception total is massive. If you get a running back that gets, 6 catches for 40 yards, well, that's an extra 10 points. So really value those receiving running backs. If you have a guy who doesn't catch the ball very much at all, let's say no targets, no catches, to get a 10-point week, you got to either hit 100 rushing yards or bank on a touchdown. And not the number of 100 rushing yard games, I would say, is less frequent. So you really need to get those receiving running backs as we talk through the options. And I think the most notable one in that category to me is Justin Rankin of the Edmonton Elks, who actually had the highest average fantasy points amongst all running backs last season, with 17 points per game as his average. And that really skyrocketed in the second half of the season. Very underutilized early in the year. I mean, in the first 8 weeks of the season, he had rushing totals of 24, 76, 30, 105, so really good game there. 4 yards, 0 yards, 69, and then 0 again. So in a span of 3 or 4 weeks, he had 3 weeks with 4 rushing yards or less. And really up until, week number 11, they didn't start giving him the ball consistently. He had a lot of games under 7 carries, but he did get the receiving work. Justin Rankin averaged 3.1 catches a game and 39.6 receiving yards per game. That's good for an average of basically almost 7 points just from receiving yardage alone, even when he wasn't rushing with the ball. But in the second half of the season, when Cody Fajardo took over as well, they kind of started leaning on Justin Rankin a little bit more. And suddenly you started seeing 10 plus carries in every single game except the last one of the season for him. And he started pumping out larger numbers there as well, more touchdowns on the board, even a 200-yard game. So I think the sky's the limit for Justin Rankin this year. If he was able to be the highest scoring running back in terms of fantasy average last season, despite those first half of the year where he wasn't utilized to his maximum potential, I think that Edmonton offense isn't going to be that much improved this year. But I think the stable force of Cody Fajardo is going to be really good there as well. So I see Justin Rankin as a really high priority in fantasy drafts. If you're playing on the official CFL site and you need the Canadian in there, well, let's talk about Brady Oliveira next. Brady Oliveira is the obvious choice, and maybe you should have talked about him ahead of Justin Rankin. He averaged 16.7 points a game last year. He was a stud all season long. Most weeks you could find him in the top 3 running backs on the week. He became the Bombers' number 1 receiver down for a lot of last season as well, with a lot of games of 6+ targets for a running back in there. Averaged 4 catches a game, averaged 36.4 receiving yards. So again, you're looking at 7.5 points just from receiving totals. The one thing that's kind of surpassed Brady Oliveira in recent years that doesn't make him the de facto number 1 is touchdowns. Last year he only had 3. I remember the year before it took him until forever to get his first touchdown on the board. And I kind of wonder what that looks like this year, because Chris Streveler took a lot of those away from him in the past. But Chris Streveler is no longer a member of the Bombers. They've changed their quarterback room. Do they, still have that much trust in the QB sneak, or do they actually start giving the ball to Brady Oliveira more when you don't have the automatic that was Streveler a lot of times from even a couple of yards out from the end zone? So I could see an uptick there. Interested as well, new offense. Tommy Condell is the offensive coordinator. Historically, doesn't use his running backs a ton in the rushing game. So could he take a little bit of a hit there? But if you have Brady Oliveira, how do you diminish his workload? I think you can't. And I think, especially given the Canadian flexibility there, Brady Oliveira should probably be the first running back off the board when it comes to drafts. Let's go to BC and talk about James Butler next. Butler had himself a fantastic season as well, averaged 16.7 points per game, and much the same as the last ones we talked about. Games, averaged 4 targets a game, 2.7 catches, 25 yards, so a little less work in the receiving game, but he added 11 touchdowns on the ground. He had a lot of rushing games of over 80 yards along the way, averaged 71 yards a game on the ground. And everybody thought, BC is that pass-heavy team. Well, James Butler still got involved and found himself with at least 5 or 6 weeks during the season where he was the number 1 finishing running back. So I think much the same for the BC Lions. Nathan Rourke's going to lead that high-powered offense. He's going to put them in positions to score, and James Butler is going to have a lot of opportunities to score and does have that receiving ability in there as well. And then let's go to Greg Bell, a new face in a new place. Greg Bell had a fantastic year with the Ticats, 16.3 points per game, and he's going over to the Ottawa Redblacks now. And Greg Bell was much the same as what we kind of talked about with Justin Rankin. They really started to lean on him kind of after Labor Day. He had a game then all of a sudden with 20 carries and 22 carries. And put up over 130 yards in both of those games, and then started adding lots of targets, lots of catches along the way, averaged 4 catches a game, just under 30 yards, much as the others there. I am intrigued and a little bit worried about the Greg Bell usage in this new offense. Ottawa didn't run the ball very much last year. I know it's a new coaching system in there, but Ryan Dinwiddie is in there and didn't particularly run the ball last year a whole lot in Toronto either, and kind of none of the running backs really took off in the running game. That being said, they did make Greg Bell the highest paid American running back in the CFL this offseason, and to me, you don't do that unless you start feeding him the ball. And I think there's question marks of who's going to start at quarterback for them, as well as reported earlier today. Is it going to be Drew Brown? Is it going to be Jake Mayer? I think that's a little bit up in the air, and I think Greg Bell is going to be that type of guy that can be that easy outlet for them as they kind of jockey for that number 1 quarterback spot, and should have some success over in Ottawa as well. Let's talk about the defending Grey Cup champions, AJ Ouellette. A little bit lower in his season average, only 13.9 points per game. I think that's skewed a little bit by them kind of resting him a little bit in the last couple of games, I'm sure. And also that first game of the year, he went down very early with only 2 fantasy points there. AJ Ouellette, a pretty solid touchdown machine. 5 straight games with a rushing touchdown near the back half of the season. He gets a lot of carries. You can bank on him more often than not. I think he only had like 4 or 5 games under 15 carries last season. He's a workhorse, and they keep riding him. And I think they're going to need to a little bit with some of the depth they've lost at wide receiver in Saskatchewan. So I think we're going to see a lot of work headed AJ Ouellette's way. And if he can stay healthy, that's always going to give him a baseline to deliver solid numbers on the ground. And if he can pair, an 80-yard rushing game with a touchdown in there, well, then he's really close to that 15-point mark that you would love to see from him. Doesn't get quite as involved in the receiving game, only 2.6 targets per game, only 14.7 yards per game last year for AJ Ouellette. But if he can pile on a couple of those with the rushing totals he has, he's going to be a pretty stable force for you. And we saw that a lot throughout the season, besides a little lull in the middle, where a lot of weeks he was in those top 2 or 3 fantasy running backs. And finally, to round out kind of the top 6 strong ones, we haven't even talked about the league's leading rusher, which was Dedrick Mills. And here's why I kind of saved Dedrick Mills for last. Yes, he led the league in rushing yards with 1,409. Yes, he had 11 touchdowns on the ground, which was really great to see. But he doesn't really catch the ball. They don't throw the ball to Dedrick Mills very much, and that matters to me from a fantasy perspective. 1.8 catches a game, 2.2 targets a game. That's skewed by one game where they threw it to him 8 times, but most weeks on the year, he was getting 1 target. And with that, an average of 16.2 receiving yards per game as well. So Dedrick Mills and AJ Ouellette, to me, Mills more so are in that category of he better put the touchdown on the board, because if not, you're going to be a little bit underwhelmed with the number that you get from him. He did have 4 games of over 100 yards last year and a couple more that were really close to it. That kind of give him that mainstay value, but he's a big name rusher, but a lot of weeks he's looking at the 4th or the 5th or the 6th, pretty average in your weekly running back rankings, kind of in the middle because of that lack of receiving ability. So make sure you check the scoring system for your league. I believe CFL site is point per reception and does weigh heavily on the receiving value for running backs. And Mills takes a hit in my rankings based on that. I would put him kind of in that middle tier in the draft. Then we get into the unknowns. The Hamilton Tiger Cats have some, they moved on from Greg Bell. A lot of people thought Johnny Augustine was going to be the incumbent, get the next opportunity there. He showed some flashes last season in a couple of starts for himself as well. He had one with 14.2 points, one with 10.3. Looked good. He's always looked good in there as a backup. He's got some receiving ability that he showed at times as well. But then also in the preseason games, Roundtree's been looking a little good there in Hamilton as well. So I think it's a little up in the air. That makes it hard to know. I wouldn't mind taking Augustine late in the draft as a Canadian as well. That's an added bonus if you're playing the Canadian, if you need the national angle to satisfy the running back. I just wouldn't jump on him early because I think there is still some uncertainty there. Same thing with the Montreal Alouettes. Stevie Scott III and Travis Tice both look like enticing deep depth options for me. I mentioned my draft earlier tonight, and I did snag both of them because I think it will be Scott III based off of the workload that he got down the stretch and heading into the playoffs. And he looked pretty good early in the playoffs there as well. Had a massive game against the Bombers in the division semifinals out east. Got involved with some receptions here and there. Hit and miss, though. He was still number 6, number 8 in the running back ranks in some of those weeks heading down the stretch, as they like to air it out to the receivers there. But he showed some promise late in the season that I'd be fine taking a chance on Stevie Scott III hitting that next level. They seemed to really like him when they got him into the lineup last season. Probably more so using him as the runner, and then Travis Tice is kind of that spelling him off, that backup running back, that receiving running back. maybe more so of what we kind of see in the NFL style if they do go with the dual system. And he did put up some points last year. He did get some targets, and he averaged 2.2 targets a game, and that includes games that he didn't even start in. He had some games with 5, some games with 4, some games with 3. And he made some big plays in the few times that he did get the ball across these games. He never got a heavy workload throughout his time before he got injured. So it remains to be seen. Like I said, they have the bye in week number 5. So hopefully in those first early games in the season, there will be that period of time to figure out and see what the pattern is going to look like for them. And maybe that's a strategy. If you're drafting late and you miss out on the other ones, take both of these guys and kind of weigh the opportunities in those first weeks to see who's really going to stand out and be your mainstay. And maybe you drop the other one and pick up another guy as injury insurance. And then the Toronto Argonauts. Your guess is as good as mine. Who's going to be the starter this year? They've got a handful of guys in Toronto. They surprisingly let go of Spencer Brown, who I was going to be really excited to draft this year because he had a lot of fantasy value down the stretch last season. And now they're left with the veteran presence kind of being Peyton Logan and then a bunch of names that I'm not familiar with at the CFL level yet. So I think the Argos are a question mark. They're also on bye in week 1, which makes it challenging to invest draft capital in a draft on one of these guys that you don't know what the depth chart is going to look like until week 2, essentially, and who's going to get the start. And maybe some news comes out before then. But I'd stay away from the Argos unless in the last round you want to take a flyer on one of the guys on the depth chart that maybe you've seen in the preseason. I know Hicks had 2 touchdowns the other day, 5 yards per carry. That looked intriguing. I know they drafted a running back. I think Smith was the last name early in the draft this year. So we need to see more film from the Argos before we know for sure who is going to be their starter for this season. And then just quickly scanning through some of the other intriguing backups that you might want to draft for depth on your roster here as well. We talked about Augustine. We talked about the Montreal running backs. Xander Horvath in BC backing up James Butler. When he got a chance to play last year and got some reps, he looked real good. He was actually the number 1 running back in week 16 when he was the starter and put up 21.2 points off of 152 rushing yards in that game. So if they find, nagging injury history with James Butler, they find they need to give him a break. Maybe Horvath is a guy you can look at there as a real deep pick or a waiver wire pickup, depending on injuries. Because if he gets into the starting lineup, he's immediately injected into that BC high-powered offense that is going to deliver opportunities to score there. In Ottawa, Daniel Adeboye has been a name that's always intrigued me, and I try to draft him every year in the CFC Draft League because he's that depth Canadian piece. He looked exciting to me whenever he had been given the opportunities, first with Toronto and then with Ottawa last year, but he was in such a logjam with an offense that didn't run the ball and William Sandback ahead of him, and that made it difficult. I think there could be opportunities for Adeboye once again. He has a little bit of receiving ability in there as well, but it remains to be seen. What does Dinwiddie do with the Greg Bell of it all? How much of an opportunity is there for Adeboye in there? That makes me not want to jump higher on him as a backup in late rounds of drafts. And then a few other names to mention. Thomas Bertrand Hudon had a couple bright spots. Go back to week 1 last season, 21.4 points after AJ Ouellette went down early. I think that got a lot of people excited about him, another Canadian backup. If they find, they need to do any load management late in the season with AJ Ouellette, if there's any injury that happens there, you can inject him into the lineup. He's going to have good starting value for you at that point in time. And then Calgary has a bit of a lot of depth behind Dedrick Mills. Deontay McMahon from the Argos last season has been brought over to Calgary, likely to fill in the backup spot there. Last year didn't really go the way any of us expected from him. He did have 2 games of over 13 points that were bright spots, but a lot of games where he was the starter that he was just not delivering whatsoever. And he had no games over 8 carries last season. Yes, he did get a lot of targets in a few of them, but not the rushing value. We know Calgary's a team that likes to run the ball. They've shown last year with Antwi, with Choquette, that they had an opportunities at times for the backup to get some role in there in the running back game as well. So McMahon is a guy that that could carve out a role for himself in Calgary and potentially get back on track, but he's going to need the workload in order to get there for you in Calgary. And then finally, Matthew Peterson, if you want that insurance policy, if you drafted Brady Oliveira in the first round of the draft and you want that insurance policy in case he does get injured, well, Matthew Peterson did pretty darn well last season in the few games that he did start in place of Brady Oliveira. He 19 points in week 1 or week 2. They were on a bye week 1, and then go back to week 21, 14.7 points from there. And also that Canadian passport. So that kind of rounds up your running back strategy. Again, really focus early in the draft. Try to snag one of those top 6, kind of in the order that we talked about there a little bit, and get you that mainstay at the running back position. And make sure you take a look at bye weeks early in the draft and have a contingency plan, because I know in week 1, BC's on a bye, Saskatchewan's on a bye. I think Toronto's on a bye, which doesn't hurt you too much at running back, but planning to have some sort of backup plan in place with some of those depth guys that we mentioned there. That's your overall running back strategy for the 2026 fantasy drafts. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts on kind of the overview I've given here, your thoughts on the running back position, who stands out to you, who's the guy you're reaching for in drafts, and maybe who's that depth value piece there as well. And then, as I mentioned off the top, stay tuned. Going to try to get some wide receiver insight into here, maybe cover kicker and defense over the coming days as well. And then getting everything ready for the CFC draft on Saturday night, that you'll be able to see kind of our thought process, all of us across the board, as we go through the rest of the picks there. In the meantime, join the Discord community. Links in the episode description. It's free to join. We have a bustling community of fans, especially fantasy football fans, in our Discord community. Lots of CFL Fantasy chatter going on there throughout the season. So join us over there. Link is in the episode description. And you can follow the show on social media at CF Countdown Pod on all of our social media accounts in the meantime as well. I'm Ryan saying thank you for listening. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.